Hello and welcome to my FlossTube channel. I'm Farish and I am so glad to be able to spend this time with you today. It is the big weekend. New Year's Eve is right around the corner and I have been thinking about the new year, new goals, new plans, new projects, all for the new year. And I think that that's probably what a lot of people are thinking about these days leading up to New Year's Eve. I will tell you that this week has been confusing. I know what the date is, but I don't often know what day of the week it is, because with the holidays, it's kind of like, wait a minute, is today Wednesday? Is today trash day? Is today the day to put the recycling out? It's like very confusing. But by the middle of next week, I should be back to some sort of normalcy, and you probably will be too. So I'm starting 2024 with a crazy road trip. I'm going to leave Winston-Salem, here, my home, heading for Fort Lauderdale about January 10th, and take a couple days to drive down that way. And that way I'll have a day to rest before I get on the cruise ship for our very first ever FlossTube at Sea cruise. Now, if you haven't signed up for our Stitcher's Escapes newsletter yet, now would be a good time to do that, because that way you'll get the information early about what's going on in 2025. Actually, we're going to have two cruises. We'll do another FlossTube at Sea, and we're going to be sailing to Alaska. Both of those will be stitching cruises. So, but back to my trip. So I'll be a solo driver on my way down to Fort Lauderdale. Already thinking about what audiobooks I'm going to listen to. And then we'll board the ship that Sunday and go on our FlossTube at Sea cruise, and that will be for a week. Then we come back. My friend Mindy and I are going to hang out in Fort Lauderdale for a day, and then we're going to head north to Palm Coast, and we're going to do a shop visit there at Inspired Needle. I'm really excited about this. Inspired Needle used to be in the Chicago area, which is where my friend Mindy lives, and so that was her local needlework store. So this will be sort of a reunion for her, first time for me. And that that shop visit is going to be on January 23rd from 3 to 6 p.m. and just do a meet and greet trunk show. I'll have a lot of my charts there, and just a chance to just say hey if you're in the area. And then once we do that shop visit, then we will head west to Fort Walton Beach, where we're going to meet up with our friend Cheryl and hopefully make a visit to the new shop. I don't know if you know this, but there's a new one in Pensacola. I don't know anything about it other than it's called Creative Stitchery, and I'm going to get more information about it. And I'm not sure, I'm not going to really say anything about a date or time, because that's real iffy. This is a girlfriend trip, so I'm trying not to make it too businesslike. Anyway, but if I get a chance to go to Creative Stitchery, I will let you know if we end up deciding to do something official. Then Mindy stays in Fort Walton Beach to do a retreat, and I head toward Columbia, South Carolina to do a retreat with my friend Kelly. This is the Stitch and Thrift retreat. It's actually in Lexington, South Carolina. And while I'm there, I hope to get over to Stitchin Kitten. And we haven't decided on exactly which day I'm going to go. It'll either be the 26th or 27th. And between now and then, I'll have at least another 2, maybe even 3 FlossTube episodes, so I can give you more details about that. So anyway, and then from there, I head home, and we'll have my second surgery on my left hand, which is gonna have at least a month recovery. Yeah, so it's been a journey, and I am learning to adapt in many, many ways. In fact, what I'm really excited about is that I have figured out how to stitch in the well with my seat frame. And in case you don't know the big advantage to this, let me show you. my camera setup is not the best here, so let me see if I can explain this. It's a matter of I can't get the camera high enough and stationary enough. Anyway, so this is what it looks like from the front. Now this is the part that goes into the stand, and so what I've done is I've rolled over the excess fabric and put it in the frame like this. The big advantage is that when you go to end a thread, then on the back you can, this is probably not the best example because my stitching isn't that close to the edges, but depending on your setup, when you go to end your threads, sometimes the embroidery hoop itself gets in the way, and by stitching in the well, then you have an uninterrupted surface on the back. You don't have the barrier of the embroidery hoop. So anyway, this was an exciting discovery for me because, you know, as you've heard me whine and complain here on my Floss Tube channel, I have stitched in hand for so long that I really resisted having to stitch with a hoop. But faced with the choice of either stitching in a way that I'm not accustomed to or not stitching at all, I put on my big girl panties, as they say, and decided I would figure out how to love it. And I'm almost there. I can't say that I will stitch in a hoop once I get my dexterity back in both of my hands. And I'm going to be really positive about this and believe that someday, and it may be a year, it may be 2 years, that I will be able to have full use of all my fingers and thumbs. Anyway, not there yet, and I know it's going to be a long road. So anyway, so figuring out how to stitch in the well was a huge aha moment for me. Now, I don't know that this is going to work with a really big project, and I don't know if it's going to work as I proceed, but we'll find out. And you know, once I kind of changed my attitude and said, okay, you know, you're smart and clever and you like to figure things out, so put that skill set to work here and figure out how to do it rather than complaining because you can't do it the way you've always done it. Because, you know, if any life lesson, if aging teaches you any life lesson, it's this one: adapt or you won't be able to do. And you know, I'm not ready to slow down yet, and so I'm just gonna adapt. Anyway, so that's my big aha moment with my stitching. What I'm working on now is the sampler that will be for the cruise next June, where again, it's the Stitchers Escapes cruise. It's sold out. It's been sold out for quite some time. We're going to be sailing from Amsterdam and have stops in Wales, Scotland, Ireland, and England. And I just can't wait. This is a cruise that has literally been in the planning stages for 6 years. We twice had it scheduled and had to cancel it because of COVID and COVID-related issues. And so now we're finally doing this cruise. So this is another ampersand sampler, and it's going to be called the Blackbird and the Guernsey Cow, because one of the places that we're going is the island of Guernsey. So let me show you the colors. I'm going to be test stitching this to test the colors because as you know, I am adamant about, as a designer, your model needs to be stitched before you go selling it, and that's a whole big thing. I just keep seeing heartbreaking posts from people who buy something from a chart that has only been charted and never stitched, and the colors are just a disaster. Anyway, I am test stitching parts of it for color, and then my friend Kelly is going to stitch stitch it for me, so because she's fast, and so I'll have a stitched model. Anyway, so nice family of greens here. I don't know if these colors are showing up here. The Blackbird's is gonna be a challenge, and this is why I love Cosmo. Has 4 shades of black, and this one is the one that tends to be a blue black. And then the details on the Blackbird, I will be able to show them by using a couple shades of the purple. And then these are the other colors. Guernsey Cow colors. The cow is going to be a bit of a challenge for me. I've gone back and forth, and I even consulted a bovine expert. And so for a while there, I was going to do a Jersey cow, but my daughter Elizabeth kept saying, but Mom, we're not going to the island of Jersey, we're going to the island of Guernsey. And there is a Guernsey cow, so you need to do the Guernsey cow. So that's what I'm working on. So that's one of my big projects for 2024. And as I said at the beginning of this video, I really need to design more. I've let my, again, adapting, I've let my inability to stitch well and stitch quickly get me off track. And I'm instead going to design like crazy and tap into my network of friends to get the samples stitched. And so that's how I'm going to adapt in that way. So want to do another Christmas sampler. Couple things I want to get into my Etsy store that people have been asking about. Anyway, just have lots of things on the drawing board. I had to really think about my 2024 goals. And it's sort of like the old wedding thing of something old, something new, something barred, something blue. Sort of like that. Anyway, I thought, okay, I'm going to pick a goal that I have kind of on my list every year and keep chipping away at it. And that's getting organized. And last year, I found that by creating the Joy Planner, that really helped me. And many people told me it helped them. And I really did intend to do it again this year. And this is back, you know, in the summer, late summer, early fall, when I needed to be doing that, is when I found any sort of keyboard work was really hard and often painful. So I had to sort of restrict how many hours a day I spent on the computer. And the Joy Planner kind of was on the bottom of that list. I mean, emails and orders and things like that had to be done. So they got done first. And as the days and weeks went by, it got closer and closer to the end of the year, and I hadn't done it. So there's not going to be one for next year. Anyway, so that's one thing, is to keep working at my desire to have my life more organized. I really do believe in the old saying that a place for everything and everything in its place. And then that way you spend a lot less time looking for stuff. I think that really does work. And so that's one of my goals. But one of my other goals is that I need to curb my procrastination. I'm not ever going to get rid of it. It's in my nature. I am a procrastinator, and I'm here to admit it. But I think that there are things I can do to, you know, the old thing, recognizing a problem is half of it. So I had to finally say to myself, you know what, Jean, you tend to procrastinate. And why do you do that? And you're putting things off till tomorrow, and your tomorrow self is not going to thank you for doing that. So that sort of helped me realize that I was hurting myself by procrastinating. Anyway, so that's one of my new goals, is to work on that procrastination factor. And I want to travel more, and as I said, design more. So I need to add, I have a whole lot of things I need to add to my Etsy store. And speaking of Etsy, while I'm traveling, I will be closing the part of my store where I have to mail out real goods because I won't be here. So scissors, fabric, things like that, I won't be shipping. The store will always be open for PDFs. So I wanted to let you know about that. And one of my goals is that I want to teach more. I'm not going to let these hand surgeries get in my way. One of the things I figured out, one of the other ways I decided to adapt, is that when I'm having a good day, I'm making videos. And then that way, when I teach, like when I teach on the ship in a couple of weeks, I'll have the videos as a backup, that if it's one of those days that I just can't do it, then I'll have the videos that I can show, and I can still talk. So, you know, the love of this craft will never die. So I'm going to find ways of sharing what I know and what I love with people who want to learn. And so keeping that in mind, I want to talk about the Continental stitch, the tent stitch, the half cross stitch, and basket weave. These are terms that have been cropping up in cross stitch groups. Now, needle pointers have been familiar with them for decades. Cross stitchers, this is kind of a new thing. And again, it's sort of been spawned by the love of full coverage pieces. So let's talk about that. Well, full coverage, and also people who want to stitch on the really fine count linens over one with a single strand of silk. So let's start with a little bit of semantics, vocabulary, if you will. So the tent stitch is like an umbrella term. There's a tent stitch, and then there are 3 stitches that are under that tent stitch: the half cross, continental, and basket weave. They all look the same on the surface, and if I were to diagram them, when you looked at a single stitch, you'd say they're all the same, and that is true. What's different is the way you stitch them, is the process, the order in which you stitch. And each one of them has advantages and disadvantages. Now, part of what I'm talking about here applies mainly to needlepoint. So if you're someone who does both needlepoint and cross stitch, you'll get this. Continental stitch by itself, if you do an entire piece in continental stitch, has a tendency to warp the final product. You'll end up with a parallelogram. Even when you stitch on a frame, continental stitch has a tendency to take this into this. 100% of the time. There's no way around it. Half cross also has a tendency to do that if you do the entire piece in half cross. This becomes this. The only one of the 3 tent stitches that doesn't do that is basket weave. Basket weave is when I do needlepoint and all I want to do is the tent stitch, basket weave is my go-to. So part of what I want to accomplish today is to help you understand the terms so that you're using the right word when you talk about this. None of the stitches are right or wrong. This is not a right-wrong thing. It's a matter of which one works best for you and the project that you're doing. In needlepoint, one of the golden rules is that you don't mix them. I don't know that that applies as much to cross stitch. I haven't done huge projects in one or the other, and frankly, I have no intention to do it, to see what the results would be. But here is one of the big differences between the 3, and that is floss or thread usage. Of the 3, half cross stitch will always use the least amount. Continental will be second, and Basketweave will be third. So if you have a kit and it calls for half cross and you're doing Continental, you will probably run out of floss. If you're doing Basketweave, you'll definitely run out of floss unless they have given you a lot of extra. So you do need to keep that in mind. So I guess one of the things I wonder about, and again, I don't have any experience in doing full coverage, and I don't have any experience in doing these really fine over one on linen projects. So if you've got experience in that and you want to chime in, please leave me a comment. But so I guess what I have to wonder is why any cross stitcher is doing anything other than a half cross. That's kind of like, it's like part of the basics of cross stitch. I mean, the 3 stitches you tend to learn once you've mastered cross stitch is back stitch and half cross. Most cross stitchers know those 3 stitches. So I kind of have to wonder why people are suddenly going in these other directions. But just in case you're one of them or you've wondered about them, I'm going to show you how to do all 3. So a half cross, which you're so familiar with, is simply one leg of a cross stitch. So when you're doing a row, then your stitches are slanting from bottom left to upper right. I know there's a lot of controversy about that it doesn't really matter which way you go when you do a half cross. But again, the educator in me is saying, why not just learn the proper terminology? When you're talking about a tent stitch, this is the slant that you get all the time. Bottom left to upper right. Now on the back, all of your stitches are going to be upright. So let's take a look at that. So that's what the back is going to look like. All your stitches are straight up and down. So if you have a second row of the same stitch and you're doing a half cross, then you will have to go in the opposite direction. So before I was going bottom to top. Now each stitch I'm going to go top to bottom. And again, when you look at the back, you still have upright stitches. Now, if I were to do a third row and I still have floss in my needle, then I'm back to doing bottom to top. So you're alternating the stitch direction between rows. Now, if I were to start a different color, or if I ran out of thread and I needed to start a new strand, then it doesn't really matter whether that next row is top to bottom or bottom to top. The only reason I'm switching is because I still have thread and I still have more of this block of color to do. So this is the half cross, and there have always been uses for it. Very often a designer will call for half cross stitch when they want an area that's more subtle, let's say a sky. So there's reasons for using it, but more and more I'm seeing where people are doing half cross as a way to do an entire piece instead of doing cross stitch. And again, on the back, all of your stitches are going to be straight up and down all the time. That is a half cross stitch. Now on to the Continental. And one of the big differences, you'll see that I'm starting on the right instead of the left. And the stitch is done in the same way, bottom left to upper right. The next stitch is done, bottom left to upper right. Bottom left to upper right. So you can see that on the surface, the stitches look the same. So think of them as being, they have the same parent, and that's the 10th stitch, but they are, and they look alike, but they're done differently. And the biggest difference you're going to see when we look at the back is when you're going to see the biggest difference between half cross and continental. So you can see, let me get it closer here, that whereas on the half cross all of our stitches were straight up and down, now with continental all of our stitches are slanted. In fact, they're slanted even more than they are on the front. And that's how you identify that something's been done by continental. Now you can work left to right. Now in needlepoint, one of the advantages of continental is the very fact that you do have extra padding on the back. You've got more thread on the back. And that makes it ideal for something that's going to get wear and tear, like a piano bench or a belt or a purse, something that is going to be used, even a rug. And before you gasp and say, my goodness, how can anybody ever walk on a needlepoint rug, I will tell you that one of our first ladies, Barbara Bush, was famous for doing needlepoint rugs, and some of them were like room-size rugs. So that is one of the advantages of continental, is that you have that extra padding on the back. So again, from the front, you cannot tell whether or not something was half cross or continental, but on the back, it's very, very clear which was which. So that is your continental stitch. Basket weave is a whole different animal. Basket weave, every single stitch is done the same way, bottom left to upper right. It's worked in diagonal journeys rather than in rows back and forth. So in this case, I'm going to do a very simple shape. I'm just going to continue with this rectangle. My next row, I'm still stitching bottom left to upper right, and this journey is going up. In needlepoint, we call this up the steps and down the poles, because you have to align the direction that you're stitching with the weave of the needlepoint canvas. And if you're stitching over one on linen with basket weave, I would recommend that you do the same thing. When the thread that's on the surface is straight up and down, when it's vertical, then that's a pole, and you slide down the pole. When the thread that's on the surface is going sideways, that's a step. Now at this point, I'm going to start back up again. So since I'm stitching this on Aida, there is no direction. So I'm just going to have to remember when I'm going up and when I'm going down. In needlepoint, it's absolutely essential that you don't repeat journeys. When you have to go up one journey and down the next, up one, down the next, down the next. If you don't, you will end up with a ridge. I don't know that in cross stitch, if you're working on Aida doing full coverage, I have no experience. I can't say whether or not that would make a difference. But again, you can see that as I'm working from the surface, you can't tell which of these stitches is half cross, which is continental, which is basket weave. And as I said, basket weave will take the most thread, and half cross will take the least. And basket weave is the only one that each stitch is done in the consistent direction of bottom to top. The other ones you have to go back and forth between the two. Now I don't know whether or not it's going to show as much on the back here, especially since I just did a small area. But traditionally in needlepoint, the back of basket weave will look like the weave of a basket, which is where it gets its name. So you don't get that effect with cross stitch, not with the thread and the quantity that I am doing here. So that is the difference between the three. And again, I can't emphasize enough that from the front, they all look the same. What makes them different is how the stitches are executed, which is, and that's the only way that you can identify them, either by watching the person stitch or by looking at the back. So why does this matter? You know, if somebody wants to continue using the wrong term for their stitching, then that's okay. You know, there's a balance between courtesy and politeness and just not correcting someone and being the teacher. And here, this time that we're spending together, I am the teacher. So I'm going to use this time to make these distinctions. If we were sitting around socially and somebody asked what you were doing and you said that you were doing Continental and I'm watching you do half cross stitch, I'm not going to say anything. But if you ask me what the differences are, I would be happy to show you anytime, any place. So, you know, I think that in anything that we do in life, whether it's cooking, whether it's fine dining, whether it's fashion, cycling, horseback riding, whatever, every one of these hobbies has a lexicon. Every one of them has a vocabulary of terms that mean something to other people who are also enjoying that pastime. And I think we owe it to ourselves, and it's a nod of respect to the legacy of this craft that we're enjoying, to use the right terms. So that's part of the reason that I'm bringing it up today, and also because, again, I keep seeing cross-stitchers using these terms. And, you know, and I love to see the crossover between needlepoint and cross-stitch and back again. I do both. I love both. There are some projects that lend themselves better to one than the other. And by enjoying them both, then I've got that versatility. So anyway, I think that that's a wrap for the day. I've got some things I need to do to get ready for this cruise and my road trip. And I'm just so excited about 2024. And I hope that you are too. Wherever you are, I hope that you stay safe and stitch happy. I'll see you later.